Okay, so what I just played were a few of the exercises that I worked on when I was learning the Moeller technique under the guidance of Mr. Jim Chapin. Jim Chapin was a pupil of Sanford Moeller and was regarded as the grand master of the Moeller technique. So I was very fortunate to have some time with him. Now there's many videos on the Moeller technique on YouTube, and a lot of the drummers have taken the applications of this technique to much higher levels than I ever have, and I really take my hat off to that. However, there's a few points that Mr. Chapin mentioned that I sometimes that I don't find in a lot of other people's videos. So I just thought I would put together some of these ideas in the hope that they will be helpful to you. One of the first things to remember at all times is that the Moeller technique is based on natural movement. Now, what is natural movement? If you ask any drummer who's playing pretty well to move more naturally, he'll say, well, hey, I am moving naturally, because we all kind of adjust to what feels good to us. And sometimes it's when we see a superior player like Dennis Chambers or Jojo Mayer or obviously the great Buddy Rich, and we realize that these people can play with a sort of a flow and a gracefulness and an effortlessness, there's a higher level of technique going on here. So there's a few examples of what I call natural movement that we encounter away from the drums, but they also become part of our drum technique. One good example is, if we want to flick drips of water off our fingers, we do that. We don't do that. We do that because that action makes the fingertips travel faster, and so the water or whatever we're flicking off flies away from the fingers. That movement ties right in with the left-hand traditional grip motion. And because it's such a natural movement and produces a reasonable amount of speed effortlessly, I think it's one of the reasons that the traditional grip has survived so many years. Another movement is if I was to pick up a stone and to skip across a pond, we all do this. Again, the power is driven from the shoulder, but by the time that motion reaches the fingertips are traveling much faster, and whatever the fingertips are holding, be it a stone or a drumstick, will also travel faster. If we take this out of the horizontal plane and put it on the vertical plane, it becomes what is sometimes called a Moeller whip stroke. Put a stick in there, and we find we can play a very powerful accent with very little physical effort, because we're using the larger muscle groups to do it. And if we can do things like play power strokes effortlessly, then we're able to incorporate them into the rest of our playing, and they shouldn't slow us down. Okay. Another cornerstone of this is the idea of continuous motion. So if I'm playing the classic Moeller triplet, Moeller technique exercise, which is the accented triplet, it can be done with continuous motion. And that then can morph into the paradiddle. And so on. Now, the reason I mention this is because on some videos that I've seen, people talk about, you swing the elbow out and then you lift the arm and then you drop this and then this comes down. And everything is presented like it's very step by step. But in fact, the motion is continuous. And Mr. Chapin was clear that Sanford Moeller was extremely fussy about this. He said you learn the motion, and the motion creates the rhythm. The sticks don't stop anywhere. So in all the exercises that you might work on, check it out, practice in front of a mirror, and see that you're getting a feeling of continuous motion. Another area that there's some debate over, I've heard some people say, oh, well, the Moeller technique's only good if you're playing one accent at a time, like if you're playing a paradiddle. Because in order to get to the next accent, you've got to raise the whole arm mechanism to do that. I discussed this with Mr. Chapin, and he was very clear that this is not the case, that you can play multiple accents with each hand if you know how to do it. And an example that he gave was like the triple paradiddle, where you have 3 rights and 3 left accents. Now if I play that again, I'll isolate the accents. Now I'm getting 3 accents of equal strength in both hands. The Moeller whip stroke creates the momentum for the first one, and then as long as I keep my wrist flexible and allow it to play what's sometimes referred to as a free stroke, we get 3 accents, but the momentum came from the Moeller accent. It's just that the others then turn back from the wrist. So that's something to look at and give a lot of consideration to. Okay, there's one other point, and that comes back to this hand motion here that we talked about at the start. And Jim said that, try and develop a more circular movement. Now, what do I mean by that? A good example is a paradiddle-diddle. If I play a paradiddle-diddle, and I'll slow it down, and hopefully you can see what I'm talking about. So the motion is quite circular. The elbow is lifting while the tip is still arriving at the drum. The wrist is coming up, the elbow is starting to drop, and so on. If you've ever seen anybody practicing the traditional Chinese art of Pt.1, Tai Chi, or Japanese Aikido, you see there's a beautiful flow, almost a dance. And Chapin even used this term. He said when played correctly, it's like a dance in midair. And the movements can be circular. Interestingly enough, Buddy Rich used to use this. If you look at, on some of the video clips, try and find an angle, one with a camera angle that's coming in on the hi-hat. With his own band, he usually used to set the tempo on the hi-hat. It was very common. He would play this kind of thing. And you would see this circular motion. Circular motions are much more energy efficient than reciprocating motions. Okay, so there you have it. That's just a few ideas that I picked up, and hopefully they'll be helpful to you, and best of luck with that.